Hello, everyone. Welcome to the St. Louis Art Museum's Art Speaks program. My name is Jessica Kennedy, and I'm the educator for adult learning at the museum. I'm going to wait just a moment so that all of our guests can tune in, but in the meantime, please familiarize yourself with the Q&A section located at the bottom of your screen. You can use this at any time to ask questions during the program. We'll select some of the questions to answer, and we'll try our best to answer as many as we can in the allotted time. The title of today's talk is The Show Must Go On. We are joined by two speakers today who are the co-curators of the exhibition, The Storm of Progress, German Art After 1800 from the St. Louis Art Museum. Simon Kelly is the curator and head of the Department of Modern and Contemporary Art, and Hannah Clem is the associate curator of Modern and Contemporary Art. Thank you both for joining us today, Simon and Hannah.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Okay, so this is a show that has come together pretty rapidly. Frankly, in response to the cancellation of another show because of the complications of international loans that was supposed to be happening this fall. So we had to look to our collection and the strengths of our collection to put together an exhibition. And that's what we've done for this exhibition. It's a show which really speaks to the importance of the German art collection at the St. Louis Art Museum. We have a wonderful collection, one of the best in America, a wonderful collection of German art, post-1800 German art. We also have some wonderful expertise on staff, including Hannah, who did her PhD in post-war German art. It's been a sort of fascinating journey, if you like, to really sort of mine and explore our collection. Briefly, the show looks at 200 years of German art from Romanticism right through to the fall of the Berlin Wall, the reunification of Germany, and actually slightly beyond into the early 2000s. And we use this title, Storm of Progress. It's a quote from Walter Benjamin, the German Jewish cultural theorist, and really sort of referencing the sort of turbulence of history in general, but particularly German history during this period, and kind of thinking about the complications of what progress means as well. Sort of ideology of progress led to considerable technological advancement, but it also led to, in many ways, to an ideology of nationalism, which then led to war, devastation, and ultimately the Holocaust. So, this show is a complicated one, I think, in terms of the issues that it addresses, but it's an important one. Hannah, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, so as Simon was saying, this show came together really very quickly. I don't know how many people really know the timelines for museum shows, but sometimes we spend up to 5-10 years on a show, and we've spent about 6 to 8 months on this exhibition. And so when we kind of got word as an entire curatorial staff that we needed to do an in-house show, which means that we couldn't bring in any objects from other institutions, we couldn't get any key loans to supplement the narrative, we really needed to look at our own collection to see what we had to be able to do a pretty amazing show. And as Simon said, the St. Louis Art Museum's German art collection is one of the best in the United States, but we also didn't want to do the same exhibition of German art that we've done before. So in 2003, we did one of our first fully collection-based German art exhibitions called German Art Now, and that was supplemented in the same year with an exhibition in prints, drawings, and photographs called The Immediate Touch. And then many of you might remember in 2013-14, when the East Building opened the new expansion, we had an exhibition of contemporary German art from the collection. So one of the things that we really thought about was, how do we do something different? How do we do something new and exciting? And how do we tell a different story? And what we decided to do was look at German art for a much longer period of time. So not focus on post-war German art, but use the shifts in the collection to be able to tell a story from 1800 to the present. And one of the reasons that we could do that is because we didn't just stop collecting German art in 2003. We actually have several recent acquisitions, most of them in the pre-1945 era, that allows us to tell this broader narrative. Slide. Simon?
Yeah, so this is the painting by Caspar David Friedrich, Sunburst in the Riesinger Berge, which we bought at auction actually in December of 2018. Actually way before I came to the museum, there'd been an institutional interest in acquiring work by Friedrich, and kind of what Hannah was saying, sort of, taking back the history. We have such a strong collection in German expressionist work and Beckmann and contemporary German work. But our 19th century collection is not particularly strong in German art. So, that was why it was important to collect Friedrich in terms of kind of telling that wider narrative. And this particular painting, Friedrich's come up very rarely on the market. This one was the first one that had come up for several years. It was in an auction at Sotheby's in London. It was actually one of two paintings by Friedrich that were for sale. So a number of Hannah, our director Brent Benjamin, we were all interested in this painting, and so I was dispatched to London to go and look at it, and I was impressed by it in person. We had a conservator look at it to check for its the qualities of its paint layers, and that's always an important thing to do, of course. And then I came back to the States. We worked with actually a dealer friend of mine who agreed to bid on behalf of the museum, and it was kind of exciting. We bid for the painting. There was a lot of competition for it. But ultimately, we had a kind of ceiling, as high as we could go. But ultimately, we were able to acquire it, and it's public knowledge, so I can say it. We managed to buy it for 1.8 million pounds sterling. That was a hammer price, and that provided us with Friedrich. And we're now one of the few museums in America. There are only 4 others: the Met, the Getty, the National Gallery, and the Kimball, who have a Friedrich. So we're in pretty good company. Anyway, for this show, it did, as Hannah said, it enabled us to tell that earlier kind of narrative of romantic painting. Hannah?
Slide, Jessica. Yeah, so adding this Friedrich was a really important aspect to this broader chronology, because Friedrich is emblematic of German Romanticism, and we really wanted to start with Romanticism, which was a shift in kind of bringing German art into what we consider the modern era. Romanticism was incredibly important to post-war artists as well. And as we started planning the show, we really wanted to think about how we could explore this long, over 200-year history, both chronologically as well as thematically. And we hope that's something that you can see as you move through this exhibition, is there are these sort of continuing themes. And we made this little kind of fun gesture at the very beginning of the show of juxtaposing the Caspar David Friedrich painting with a post-war work from Gerhard Richter from 1969. And Richter is probably one of the most famous post-war German artists. He's almost a household name, possibly in St. Louis even more than other places. And he was always really interested in landscape, and he started making landscapes in 1968. And one of the artists he was referencing in his creation of landscapes was Caspar David Friedrich. So this is a very intentional pairing to think about how there was a reciprocity between post-war and pre-war German artists, but also how themes, art historical themes such as landscape, continue through history. Yet Richter is actually doing some things that are building on Friedrich and are different than Friedrich. In particular, he's really interested in photography and reproduction. While Friedrich, obviously, was an artist kind of working pre-photography, Richter's interested in how landscapes and how depictions have continued to evolve with technological changes. So here Richter's taken a photograph of a landscape that he's then used a second mechanical reproduction technique, the lithograph, to create this artwork. And so here he's trying to remove sort of subjective decisions from this process by using these different source materials and showcasing the kind of artificiality of art. something that Friedrich wasn't doing. Friedrich was really interested in the subjectivity of art, in the transcendental, in the sublime. And Richter, working post-Holocaust, World War II, is really thinking about how those issues change as technology advances and as history moves forward. But what's interesting is, as you dig deeper, you can see that many of the choices made by Richter are subjective. So we're trying to draw attention to how art and history, and even art history, are all kind of contingent on each other. And these decisions by these artists, we can see through these different legacies of art history. Slide.
So this, an exciting part of this show, I think, for all of us, and there are 4 curators who worked on the show in addition to me and Hannah, Melissa Venator, and Molly Moog. But it's also been very much a sort of, cross-collaborative project in terms of working with other departments. And one of the departments that Hannah and I have worked most closely with is the Department of Prints, Drawings and Photographs. So you'll see a really interesting range of media throughout the show, and part of that is due to the large number of prints, drawings and photographs in the show. And this is just to give a sort of example of that. We had this, which I actually didn't know about, but we had this Friedrich woodcut. It's actually by his brother. It's a Caspar David Friedrich design, but the woodcut was actually made by his brother, a Christian. But it speaks to a lot of the sort of principal themes that Friedrich was interested in: melancholy, the importance of botany, the suggestion of the sort of fragility of life with the cobweb, the importance of symbolism. But I think, just to emphasize that this has been an important collaboration. Next one, please, Jessica.
Yeah, and this collaboration continued through every section of the exhibition, which was, I think, a really important part of this show, and again, differentiated it from previous shows, was to look across media, decorative arts, which we'll show you later in the presentation, as well as works on paper. So this is an example of some of that interesting mixed media in the post-war era, where we use these kind of objects to showcase the way that artists were using found materials, mechanical reproductive techniques, and other different modes of art making. But it's also really important because these objects came out of a really transformative gift to the Art Museum. In 2003, Earl and Betsy Millard donated their collection to the Art Museum, and part of it was exhibited in that 2003 exhibition I mentioned, Immediate Touch. But there were several objects, because it was a large collection, that had never been on view or had been on view only in that show. So one of the things this exhibition allowed us to do was really showcase a beautiful history of both acquisition and collecting by the Art Museum. And so these 3 works, 2 of them are by a German artist named Georg Harold, one is by Emmy Noble, and the Georg Harolds are very playful. So here he's sewn buttons to a primed canvas, kind of playing with the idea of abstraction. I think they kind of look like Morse code, but they're actually entirely arbitrary. So they're meant to make you kind of think that you're supposed to see something deep in this, but actually it's kind of questioning that very nature of conceptual art and what it really means to create art that has this kind of tautology of examining what art is. And then the farther right image by Harold, he actually uses a photocopier to make this. And then on each photocopy, he adds a number. So ours is 422. So there's been 422 different numbers. Well, actually 421 different numbers photocopied. And then he writes 422 on there, creating this play with reproductive techniques. So really like looking at the playfulness of German art as well as the seriousness of German art throughout these different time periods, and how artists are really questioning what art is. It's one of the things that remains a constant in German art throughout the whole show, is artists really looking at what it means to create artwork. Emmy Noble is doing that here when he's taken a normal piece of masonite and cut it into a square and placed it on a canvas stretcher. He's really, interrogating the idea of the monochrome, of the found object, and really this long history of avant-garde art. Slide.
So this is another opportunity to showcase a recent acquisition. So the painting on the left, Franz von Stuck, Teasing, was bought in 2018. I remember von Stuck is an interesting artist. He was an important figure in the Munich art scene in the late 19th century and early 20th century, important teacher to a variety of artists who are represented in our collection, including Kandinsky and Klee. And this one I thought was interesting because, in many ways, because of the sort of the technique is overlapping with some of the pointillist techniques which were happening elsewhere in Europe at the same time. In any case, it was being offered by a dealer in London, so I had to go over to London to see it. I liked it when I saw it, and we went through all the sort of hoops you have to go through to acquire a picture. And ultimately, we acquired it. It's been, I think, a sort of valuable acquisition. And I think in this show, at least for me, it's been great to show it alongside the dancers. A relief piece, which is a variant of a stucco relief, which was actually part of the music room of Franz von Stuck's villa in Munich, which you can still visit today. So it's kind of interesting to see it within this context in our show. And also in this show, just to think about the importance of decorative arts. And again, there's been a great collaboration with our decorative arts department. And you can see here on this slide, the slide on the right, kind of interesting Jugendstil as a context for von Stuck's work. So we have a Richard Riemerschmidt chair, and then a Margaret von Brauchitsch a window curtain, which I love. It's sort of minimalist, but it has, if you look carefully, it has these kind of organic scroll-like patterns within it. Next slide, please.
So another aspect of really any exhibition, but especially a larger exhibition in the temporary exhibition space, is to think about the conservation. And conservation in general of our collection is really important. And one of the things we've gotten to do in this show is address some of the conservation of objects, but also show things that don't always get to be on view because of their issues with their materiality or their conservation. And this is one of my favorite paintings in the whole show. And you don't get to see it very often at SLAM because it's printed on commercial fabric, like a bed sheet or a cheap curtain you'd get at IKEA. And as we all know from our own houses, these things can fade in light very quickly. So there's a kind of protectiveness we have to have with the Polka's cloth paintings. Everybody does. Every museum that has these has to deal with this. So they can only be on view every once in a while. So this was out in 2014 as part of the East Building opening, but it hasn't been able to be on view since. So we got to put it back out again and let everybody see this really amazing painting that I think is just a cornerstone, not only of our post-war German collection, but also of a really important artist looking at an incredibly interesting moment in the Cold War. So he's used a found image, which you can kind of see in this image. You'll have to come see it in person to really get the whole picture. But he's used a source image from Time magazine. So in 1983, Time magazine actually designated the computer the machine of the year, replacing its normal person of the year. So it's really interesting, especially from our vantage point now, think of the 80s, think of the space race, the importance of technology in the Cold War. And Polka's making this in the moment of thinking about what the computer means across a Cold War divide in terms of technological development and the sort of battle between capitalism and communism. Slide.
So this has been kind of an interesting project, working with our conservation department and specifically Courtney Books, our conservator. So this is a painting by the American artist Charles Ferdinand Weimar. So Weimar was actually born in Germany in 1828, but he came to St. Louis at the age of 15, and he's probably best known for his imagery of Native Americans, a number of which we have on view in the museum. So in this exhibition, we wanted to sort of highlight another aspect of his practice because we also had this painting in the collection, which was a painting he made when he went back to Germany in the early 1850s to study at the Dusseldorf Academy. So this is a work which shows the Castle of Heidelberg. I'm not going to go into all the complexities of the Castle of Heidelberg. You can see that or hear about that, or read about that rather on the labels in the or the label in the exhibition. What I want to mention here is the conservation work, and Courtney did a lot of work on on this painting. Probably maybe just to sort of highlight one or two things. So the core project was to remove layers of discoloring varnish. So if you compare, for example, the areas of sky at top right, she restored the original luminosity of the blue in the sky. You can see that in the painting on the left. She restored the warmth of yellow in the sky, that area against which the figure is silhouetted. And she also restored you really have to see the painting actually, but take my word for it, the sort of depths of brown in the foreground. So it's been a sort of interesting and important side, well, not more than a side, but an important project for the exhibition. And a nice collaboration with the American department. Anna, next one, please.
So, while the exhibition is really set up sort of chronologically and thematically, the reason we can do this exhibition, we have these works, is because of this history of collecting German art. So the kind of behind the scenes story of this image, Gerhard Richter's Olberg, which has become, kind of the signature image of the exhibition, is that this was actually one of the first major post-war objects that the museum purchased. And we bought it in 1987. And it was painted in 1986. And in the 80s, early 80s, Richter was just one of many German artists who were just starting to get attention in the United States. And SLAM actually organized one of the first exhibitions for young German painters in 1983 called Expressions New Art in Germany, that featured several artists in this exhibition, including Jörg Immendorf, whose image is in the installation shot you see on the right. But Richter wasn't in that show. And we had a very prescient curator, Michael Shapiro, in the 80s, who really saw Richter as being, one of the most important German artists of the moment. And he went to the exhibition at Richter's gallery in New York, Marion Goodman Gallery, and saw this series of abstract paintings and thought the museum really needed it. So it's an interesting moment historically of a curator's prescience and being able to see an artist and really know this is going to be a big deal, and helping the museum to, acquire this object. So it's got a great story behind it. And many of the works have those, and that's why we have this collection that we can show you in this exhibition. Slide.
So this is actually this painting is being premiered, I guess you could say, in this exhibition. It's a new acquisition. It is the first time that it has been shown in public in St. Louis. So it's Gabriele Munter's Cemetery with a New Grave. And we've been looking for a painting by Gabriele Munter for a long time. She's such an important figure in German Expressionism and particularly the Blue Rider group. But we didn't have a painting by her in our kind of male-dominated, German Expressionist collection. So it was important to me, I think for Hannah too, to acquire a work by her. So I remember I'd actually been to Munich in 2015 to look at another painting as a possibility. That one hadn't worked out. But then this one came up in 2019. So I went back to Munich to look at it. And that's important to realize. Whenever we buy a painting, we have to see it in advance. So I went to look at this painting and I loved it. When I first saw it, the sort of color, it didn't bother me that it was a cemetery subject. I love the color, the flatness, the kind of sense of abstraction, the fact that it's actually painted in Murnau, which was such a important location for the Blue Rider. This is where Munter had her house. This is where she was buried, and it's a great moment. It's 1908, so for a lot of reasons, it made sense for us to acquire and we were able to do that. It's exciting to see it in the exhibition. Next one.
So here's a couple examples of that cross-departmental collaboration that we've been mentioning so often. Is SLAM's actually been collecting Bauhaus objects for a while, and we acquired in 1993 this amazing lamp by Wilhelm Wagenfeld, and this was actually made in the Bauhaus. And one of the things that's so fantastic about the objects that we have that are actually from the Bauhaus school. So the Bauhaus was a school in Germany that was founded in 1919 and was forced to close by the Nazis in 1933, but embraced this unity of art and design. And the students were encouraged to actually create prototypes for industry of lamps, of tea caddies like you see here, but they were actually pretty handmade. They weren't really mass produced in their original prototype form. So both of these objects actually showcase considerable skill at metalworking, at glassworking, and they're really products of virtuosic handwork as opposed to just this representation of mechanical reproduction. So it's really wonderful to be able to show these alongside all of this long history of German art and design, but also bring in this idea that German industry became really important and also really problematic as the Nazi, kind of usurped the industry in the 30s and 40s. And then how do we kind of go back to look at that time period from the post-war era as well? Slide.
So I think, obviously, St. Louis Art Museum has the largest collection of paintings by Max Beckmann in the world. So we wanted to include some examples by Beckmann in the exhibition. And these are the two that we have. The one on the left is an earlier painting, shows the Baltic coast. And importantly was part of the bequest of Morton May. So, really the only reason that we can do this show is through the generosity of the gifts of our donors. And Hannah mentioned the Millards, and before them, the bequest of Morton D. May in 1983 really just transformed our collection overnight, particularly the German collection, with the gifts of the Beckmanns. 35 of our 39 Beckmanns come from the May bequest, but also an exceptional number of German expressionist paintings. And then on the right, we have an important painting, Christ and the Sinner. In the case of this one, it came from the dealer, Kurt Valentin. But this work enabled us to speak about Beckmann's engagement with the war. And actually, in the case of the exhibition, to relate it to a print from the war, which we hadn't shown for several years. Next slide, Hannah.
Yeah, so that transition, of the 1930s and 40s and looking at World War II was really important. That's one of the things you have to really deal with when you do a German show, especially one that bridges that time period. Going from 1800 to the present, we knew we had to address World War II, we had to address the Nazi era, and we had to address the Nazi atrocities, including the Holocaust. But we didn't have individual works that necessarily fully spoke to that from that time period. But we do have amazing paintings by a generation of artists who were born at the very tail end of the war or right at the end of the war, who were instrumental in sort of confronting the war's traumatic legacy in the early post-war era, and in particularly looking at their parents' and grandparents' involvement with the Nazi regime. And here you can see the wall that kind of deals with those subject matters. And this is one of those paintings called Tull by the East German artist A.R. Penck, where he's taken the Nazi eagle. It's kind of flying over a mountain range, very symbolic of sort of the way that the Nazi Party usurped German landscape as a symbolic gesture. And then this word Tull, it might look kind of nonsensy at first, but it's actually Blut backwards, which is blood. So there's this looking back on this kind of past and the atrocities of the Nazi regime. And it sort of forces viewers to think about what it means to create art after the Holocaust, and sort of shocking the German public into identifying with, and to confront their past, basically, and forcing society to confront their past. So this was really important to us. And we also have a really large-scale timeline of German history that really helps address the entirety of German history from 1800 to the present that visitors can go in and kind of see. And I think eventually we're trying to get some of it online so that people can really see that whole history. Slide.
Yeah, I mean, in 2014, I'd done one of our collection rotations on Joseph Beuys, specifically looking at his relationship with his students, like Jörg Immendorf and Walter Dahn, but also his colleagues like Polker and Richter. And I guess that's a background to what Hannah has done here, which is, I think, in many ways is more focused and interesting. Hannah, maybe you want to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's one of the things we're trying to do is we do have this history of really showcasing the German art in collection rotations, such as Simon's examination of Joseph Beuys and his students and really his influence. So we were trying to think, how do we just not recreate these same installations over and over again that many visitors have had the opportunity to see? And one of the things we did with the Beuys works was try to put them in dialogue with performance art and think about Beuys as a performance artist who is highly influential to how artists really used creative acts and thought about sculpture as performance or sculpture as activism, and really used art to permeate all aspects of society and really thinking about social justice in the time. So really being able to look at performance as a model of social critique. Slide. And that was really, the other thing that was really important to us was also showcasing a lot of women artists in the post-war era, as many as we could, because again, collections are built at various times. We don't have complete control over what happens in the past. So we really wanted to bring out as many as we could. And the final gallery becomes a really lovely constellation of German artists that includes several women artists. And one of the things that we did do is focus on women photography. And there are these two beautiful photographs in the final gallery by Beate Götschau and Simone Neveg. And they're some of the most recent works in the show. And this also came out of a sense of necessity, in that many of our Dusseldorf School photographs from the 90s we couldn't show again because of the light levels on them from the 2013-14 show. So here we got to actually bring out artists that maybe don't have the same name recognition as Thomas Struth or Andreas Gursky, but these photographs are really absolutely stunning, and they kind of give a lovely punctuation to the show of artists thinking about advances in technology in the 90s, of globalization, of industrialization, of really the world opening up after the Berlin Wall fell, and how Germany kind of entered a global stage at that point. Slide.
Yeah, so this is the last slide. So just to finish up, this is our great painting by Gerhard Richter, Betty. As Hannah's been, she's shown examples of abstract work by him, but we have a really wide range of work by Richter, and this is probably the best, well, it is the best known painting, Betty. It's his photorealist style. It's a work that shows his daughter, and it's based on a photograph from around 10 years before he painted this painting. And it's interesting that his daughter is actually represented in front of one of his I think it's one of his grey paintings. You can actually see the ground, the floor, just at the bottom right, below the painting. But it has become sort of the Mona Lisa, I'd say slightly tritely, of our contemporary collection. But it's interesting when, there was a large retrospective of Richter's work in 2012, which traveled to the Tate, National Gallery in Berlin, and the Pompidou Center, and on the right you can see of all of Richter's images that they could have chosen in Paris, they chose our painting. So I was lucky enough to see the show. This is one of my very bad photographs, but it does at least actually give a sense of what things look like there. And for somebody who doesn't actually originally come from St. Louis, it actually made me proud to be a St. Louisan. So I will say also, the way that last gallery, the way that Hannah, I know Molly working with, it's been a group collaboration, but it's interesting to see the Richter installed within the context of some lesser known works in that space, which I think has been kind of eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I think we should mention, we've alluded to it, but there's about 25 works that have never been on view, many things you'll see in completely different contexts. And actually some of the major things you might expect stayed in the galleries because this exhibition is free. We really wanted the people of St. Louis to have a space they could go in and have it not charged. And then you can go through the galleries and see other German works that are still on view because the collection is just that deep.
Great, yeah, that's great. I think that's
great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to, we have a question here, but in order to answer this question, I'm going to actually move backwards in your slides. It is about a particular work of art, so sorry. Okay, there we go. So the question is, in this image, other than the appropriated image on the left, is there a subject on the right?
So the image So it's a full cover. So the seated figure is actually a sculpture by George Siegel, a pop artist. It's really interesting because this is Time magazine. This isn't like some obscure art journal. So Time magazine in 1983 actually commissioned the pop artist George Siegel to design the cover. So it's kind of a table with a computer. There isn't an actual figure. The only figure is the figure sitting in the chair, but the image itself has a computer on a desk and this kind of plaster figure is sitting on it. If you come to the exhibition, we actually have the source image of the Time magazine cover on the label that you can compare it to. But then what Polka has done is he's made this kind of abstract painting on top of that source image. And he used this substance called manganese, which is this metallic kind of powder. So it really obscures it. And then it was printed on this patterned, kind of dot patterned cloth. So it's incredibly multifaceted. And that's intentional. And it shimmers, which is really interesting because he's kind of trying to mimic like an old computer screen, the ones that kind of had a curve to them. If you saw them from different angles, you'd have a glare. And so this painting does that to you. It looks pixelated from the dots in the fabric, and there's a glare from this beautiful shimmery surface. So he's really playing with all of these different elements of how technology is intervening in our life. And I think there's a lot to think about it now compared to 1983, where I think we could probably re-say that Zoom and the computer have come into our world as the machine of the year as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, if anyone else has questions, please submit them. Right now, I actually have a question for you while we're waiting for any others to join in. So I know we kind of talked about it at the top, but if you could say what was the most difficult part of planning an exhibition during this pandemic, what would that be?
Difficult part. I don't know. I mean, I think in some ways, it's quite an ambitious show conceptually, and but it's not exactly a limit. But I guess I've been kind of spoiled in the shows that I've done. In the past, you kind of get any loan from anywhere, to make the point of the show. So I guess for me, it was probably that, that we have, we're working with our collection, and we have a great collection. We do. But we early on we decided this would not be a lone show. So it was kind of, I think it was working within, knowing we were working within, maybe boundaries is the wrong word, but we knew we were focusing on our collection, but we were still trying to make these really ambitious arguments. So it was trying to sort of walk that tightrope, if you like.
I think for me, it was also having to transition everything remotely. I didn't realize how much I learned and how much I get out of just like popping into somebody's office, or, I co-curated a show on the Bauhaus with two curators, Eric Lutz and Jenny Cordonovas, who both kind of worked on the show. But how much when the three of us did that, we were just chatting and talking and running down to storage to look at things. And, we're all in the same boat in the world. You have to book your time at storage. Only a few people can be in there. You can't, we'd have to have one person go in and look at an object and then leave the room and be in the hallway while another person went and looked at an object. And you just realize how much thinking comes through just kind of everyday conversations.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm sure everyone at this point could relate to this.
Let's see. Oh, great. We have another one here. With this show, which came first? Looking at the collection to see what kind of show you wanted, or knowing what kind of show, then finding the works to tell your story, or to tell the story?
Do you want to answer that first, Hannah?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting incident where they came together, and that's because we know the collection well. Because we've all done, as Simon was saying, he did he's done rotations of post-war German art. I've done rotations of post-war German art. Our fellow Melissa Benatter is already doing a book on German Expressionism. So I felt like when the idea came up, when we were all kind of tasked as curators to come up with a show that could be collection-based, the German collection became an obvious, well, hey guys, is there something you can do? And then we just kind of paired our knowledge of the collection with what we could do differently. And so it was pretty organic. But I think we were really surprised by some of the depths in the departments that aren't ours. Like I was really surprised by some of the deck arts. Even though we did the Bauhaus show, there were still things I didn't really know about. And I think photography and prints and drawings just had so much more than we anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think, it was kind of fascinating to mine the collection and thinking about, for example, the series of Klinger prints that we have. We have a selection of those in one of the opening galleries. So it's actually been kind of exciting to actually explore what we have in the collection, and try to make what we have in the collection fit and relate to these broader, fairly ambitious conceptual themes that we've developed. So in some ways, I guess it has been kind of inductive, responding to the works we have in the collection.
All right, well, we have one last question, I think. Did this exhibition help the curatorial team across departments decide what future acquisitions of German art you might like to make?
That's a good question. I think we definitely noticed holes in the collection. As curators who want to acquire work, we're always noticing holes in the collection that we could fill. So I think we did realize there are some areas that we didn't have works in that became interesting. I'd be interested in hearing some of the other curators and whether it inspired any of them to think in their collections about where they could build. But I think for us, there's a lot of pre-war avant-garde movements that we don't have as well represented, like Dada and Weimar era, Neue Sachlichkeit. So it becomes interesting to see that while we have this amazing breadth, there's always something else.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think in many ways, the Munter is kind of the first step. I mean, we need to build out our collection of women artists in the early part of the 20th century and beyond. So we'll and also it's interesting just thinking about. I mean, Hannah knows this better than I, but just what sort of global range of German contemporary art today, and thinking about that and how we can develop that hopefully. So we have made some good steps in recent years, but I think there's a lot more to do.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Simon and Hannah, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. For a deeper dive into German Expressionism, join us on Thursday, December 3rd at noon. The curatorial fellow, Melissa Vanatter, will be discussing the history of the movement through paintings in the museum's collection, as well as some that are shown in this exhibition that we were just talking about. So I encourage you to check under the events tab in the museum's website for more upcoming Art Speaks programs. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming.